The warning came through every frequency at once. Ambassador Tekresh of the Volthine Empire watched the signals light up his console like stars appearing in the night. Unauthorized vessels. Unregistered species. Violation of Concordat Space Protocol, Article 7. Section 3. His secondary arms moved across the controls while his primary arms folded in the gesture of deep concern. In 12,000 cycles, this had never happened. Every species knew the rules. Every species asked permission before leaving their home system. Every species waited for approval before expanding into the galaxy. Every species except, apparently, these newcomers. "Show me," Tekresh said. The hologram materialized above his desk. 5 massive ships hung in the darkness of the outer reaches, each one larger than a Concordat battle station. They were ugly things, all angles and patches, like someone had built them from scraps and hope. But they moved with purpose, heading toward an empty star system that had been cataloged but never claimed. "Have they responded to our hails?" Tekresh asked. "Yes, Ambassador." His aide, a young Volthine named Reshk, brought up the transmission. "They seem confused by our demands." The face that appeared on screen was strange. 2 eyes instead of 4. No sensory stalks. Skin that looked soft enough to tear. The creature smiled, showing flat teeth that could barely cut protein paste, let alone live prey. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the UESS Perseverance," the creature said. "We're receiving your transmissions, but we're having trouble understanding the legal basis for your demands. Could you clarify which treaty or agreement you're referencing?" Tekresh felt his throat sacs inflate with irritation. "I am Ambassador Tekresh of the Galactic Concordat. You have entered Concordat-supervised space without authorization. You must halt immediately and submit to protocols." The human's expression didn't change. "Ambassador, our scans show this region as unclaimed and uninhabited. We're not entering anyone's territory. We're simply moving to an empty star system to establish a colony. All space is Concordat space," Tekresh said, speaking slowly as if to a hatchling. "All species must petition for membership and receive approval before expansion. This has been law for 12,000 cycles." "That's interesting," Captain Chun said. "But we never signed any agreement with your Concordat. We didn't even know you existed until 3 days ago." Tekresh's sensory stalks quivered. Ignorance of the law is not exemption from the law. Actually, in human legal tradition, you can't be bound by laws you never agreed to, Chun replied. Her tone remained pleasant, but something in her eyes had changed. They looked harder now. "We're not trying to cause problems, Ambassador. We're just trying to survive. Earth is overcrowded. We need living space. This system is empty, so we're taking it. You cannot simply take what you wish." Tekresh's voice rose despite his training. "There are procedures. There are rules. You must submit a petition. You must demonstrate your species is suitable for galactic society. You must prove you will not threaten the peace we have maintained for millennia." The human leaned forward slightly. "Let me ask you something, Ambassador. Who gave the Concordat the right to decide who gets to exist where?" The question struck Tekresh like a physical blow. The Concordat was formed by the 3 founding species to prevent war and ensure prosperity for all. Every species benefits from our guidance. "I'm sure they do," Chun said. "But here's the thing. We didn't ask to be born on an overcrowded planet. We didn't ask to develop intelligence and technology and the ability to reach the stars. We didn't ask permission to exist. We just do. And now that we're here, we're going to keep existing, whether your Concordat approves or not." "You do not understand the forces you are defying," Tekresh said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "The Concordat commands fleets that dwarf your primitive vessels. We have weapons that could sterilize your home world in moments. You would be wise to show proper respect. Captain Chun's smile faded completely. Ambassador Tekresh, my species survived an ice age with nothing but fire and fur. We survived plagues that killed half our population. We survived wars where we tried to exterminate ourselves with nuclear weapons. We survived our own planet trying to kill us through storms and droughts and climate collapse. We're still here, not because anyone gave us permission, not because anyone helped us, but because we refused to die. She stood up, and despite her small size and soft appearance, something about her presence filled the screen. You can threaten us all you want. You can send your fleets and wave your weapons around, but you can't make us ask permission to exist in empty space. And if you try to stop us with force, well, you won't be the first thing that tried to kill us. You won't be the last either. The transmission ended. Tekresh sat in silence, his sensory stalks hanging limp. Reshk shifted nervously beside him. Should we deploy the enforcement fleet? The aide asked. Tekresh didn't answer immediately. He had served the Concordat for 300 cycles. He had negotiated with hundreds of species. He had seen primitive civilizations humbled by the scope of galactic power. He had watched them bow their heads and accept their place in the order of things. But he had never encountered a species that simply didn't care. Yes, he said finally. Deploy the fleet, but transmit everything to the High Council. They need to see this. What should I tell them, Ambassador? Tekresh watched the hologram of the human ships. They hadn't altered course. They hadn't slowed down. They simply continued toward their destination as if the Concordat didn't exist. Tell them we have a problem, Tekresh said. Tell them there is a species that refuses to follow the rules. Tell them the humans have arrived, and they didn't ask permission. Over the next 3 cycles, the situation escalated in ways Tekresh had never imagined. The humans continued toward their target system. The Concordat deployed warning beacons. The humans ignored them. The Concordat sent automated defense drones. The humans flew around them. The Concordat issued formal declarations of violation. The humans filed them in what Captain Chun called the circular storage system, which Tekresh eventually realized meant garbage. But the strangest thing wasn't human defiance. The strangest thing was what happened on the Concordat communication networks. Other species were watching. Younger races who had bent the knee to join the Concordat began asking questions in their public forums. Questions like why the Vryn had been forced to surrender 3 colony worlds during there. Questions like why the Serati weren't allowed to broadcast their traditional music because it violated galactic harmony standards. Questions like why any species needed permission to exist in empty space. Tekresh read the reports with growing alarm. The humans had been in Concordat space for less than a solar cycle, and they were already destabilizing 12,000 cycles of carefully maintained order. And they were doing it without firing a single shot. The vote took 7 cycles. 7 cycles of debate, argument, secret meetings, and political maneuvering that would have been impressive if it hadn't been exhausting. Tekresh watched representatives who had cooperated for centuries turn against each other. He watched alliances form and dissolve. He watched the Concordat tear itself apart over a single question. Did species need permission to exist in empty space? The answer, when it finally came, was decided by 3 votes. 3 representatives out of 300 who changed their position at the last moment. The Concordat would reform, not because the founding species wanted it, not because the council agreed it was right, but because enough species recognized that the alternative was a war they might not win. A war where every younger species would be watching to see if the Concordat's peace was worth the cost of maintaining it. Through violence, the new framework took 50 cycles to negotiate. Captain Chun participated in every session, along with representatives from the Vryn, Serati, and 12 other species who had found their voices during the crisis. The founding species fought every concession, but the political reality was clear. Either they adapted or they lost control entirely. The final document was called the Accord of Mutual Sovereignty. It established that empty space required no permission to settle. That protocols were optional consultations, not mandatory submissions. That tribute payments were voluntary cooperation, not enforced taxation. That cultural expression was a fundamental right, not a privilege granted by galactic authority. It transformed the Concordat from an empire in all but name to something closer to a real confederation of equals. The elder species hated it. The younger species celebrated. And humanity just kept building. Tekresh found Captain Chan at the colony's 6 solar cycles after the accord was ratified. The settlement had grown beyond recognition. What had been a few temporary shelters was now a thriving town of several thousand humans. Lights stretched across the landscape. Agricultural domes glowed with growing crops. The sound of construction echoed even at night as humans worked in shifts to expand their home. Chun was in a garden, of all places. She knelt in actual soil, planting something with small flowers. She looked up when Tekresh approached, her hands dirty and her smile genuine. "Ambassador." "I'd stand, but I'm covered in mud. I do not mind." Tekresh settled onto a bench designed for human proportions. His ceremonial robes looked absurd in the garden setting. "I wanted to see what you built." "It's not much yet," Chun said, turning back to her planting. "But it's ours. Every building, every road, every plant. We made it ourselves, in empty space, without asking anyone's permission. You changed the galaxy. We just refused to follow rules we never agreed to." Chun patted soil around the plant. The galaxy changed itself once it remembered it could say no. Tekresh was quiet for a moment. Many of the elder species will never forgive you. They see the accord as a humiliation, as the destruction of everything they built. "They'll adapt," Chun said, "or they won't. That's their choice. But they can't go back to the old system. Too many species have tasted freedom now." "Freedom." Tekresh tested the word. "Is that what this is? Isn't it?" Chun stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "The freedom to exist without permission. The freedom to succeed or fail on your own terms. The freedom to say yes or no to cooperation based on mutual benefit rather than fear. What would you call it?" "Chaos, possibly." Chun laughed. "Maybe, but it's honest chaos. Better than orderly oppression." They walked through the colony together. Humans greeted Chun as they passed, some in her own language, others in rough approximations of Concordat standard. Children played in the streets. Merchants sold goods in a market square. Somewhere music played, a mix of human melodies and something that sounded like Sarati harmony compositions. "The Vrin have stopped paying tribute completely," Tekresh said. "The Sarati broadcast their traditional music on every frequency. 15 younger species have filed for renegotiation of their terms. Another 20 are considering it. The Concordat I served for 300 cycles is dying. Is that a bad thing? I do not know." Tekresh watched a group of human children chase each other around a fountain. The Concordat brought peace. It prevented wars. It created stability. At what cost? Chun asked gently. How many species submitted not because they wanted to, but because they were afraid? How many gave up their cultures, their territories, their autonomy, because they thought they had no choice? That's not peace, Ambassador. That's just successful intimidation. And what happens now? When species conflict without Concordat mediation, when territorial disputes have no authority to resolve them, when the carefully maintained balance collapses. Chum stopped walking and turned to face him. What happened when humans faced those problems? We talked. We fought sometimes. We made mistakes. We learned. We built systems based on consent and mutual benefit rather than imposed authority. We're not perfect, Ambassador. We've had wars and genocides and horrible mistakes. But we survived. And we became stronger because we learned how to cooperate as equals rather than as dominants and subordinates. Your species is very young, Tekresh said. You have not faced the scale of galactic conflict. No, Chun agreed. But we faced extinction over and over. And we're still here. Not because we submitted to whoever was strongest, but because we adapted, we persisted, and we refused to accept that anyone else got to decide if we deserved to exist. They reached the edge of the colony, where the lights faded into darkness. Beyond, the empty planet stretched toward distant mountains. Human survey markers dotted the landscape, claiming territory not through conquest, but through simple presence. What will you do now? Tekresh asked. Keep building, Chun said. Establish more colonies. Explore more systems. Meet more species. Trade with those who want to trade. Cooperate with those who want to cooperate. Defend ourselves if necessary, but never be the first to attack. And if the elder species attempt to restore the old order, Chun's expression hardened. Then they'll learn what every tyrant throughout human history learned eventually. You can't make people submit forever. Someone always says no. And once one person says it, others remember they can too. Tekresh felt something shift inside him. A realization that had been building since he first encountered Captain Chun in her construction suit, refusing to stop building simply because he told her to. I am resigning from the Concordat diplomatic service, he said. Chun looked surprised. Why? Because I spent 300 cycles enforcing rules I never questioned. I told species they needed permission to exist in empty space, and I never asked why. I threatened punishment for defiance, and I never considered if the rules were just. Tekresh turned to face the colony lights. You asked me who gave the Concordat the right to control empty space. I still do not have an answer. And until I do, I cannot serve an institution built on that claim. What will you do? I am not certain. Perhaps I will study human philosophy. You seem to have strong opinions about liberty and individual rights, and the relationship between authority and consent. Chun smiled. We've had a lot of practice questioning authority. Welcome to the club. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the colony lights twinkle in the darkness. Somewhere, a human child laughed. Somewhere, a Sarati melody played on unauthorized frequencies. Somewhere, a Vryn representative argued with Concordat officials about treaty renegotiation. The galaxy was changing. Not because humanity conquered it. Not because humans were stronger, or smarter, or more advanced than anyone else. But because humans asked a simple question and refused to accept the standard answer. Who gave you the right to tell me I need permission to exist? 10 solar cycles later, Ambassador Tekresh retired. Sat in a small apartment on the human colony world, New Haven. He had grown to appreciate human naming conventions. Direct, honest, hopeful. His new book was nearly complete. The Philosophy of Consent, Human Political Theory and Galactic Application. It would be controversial. The elder species would hate it. But 17 younger species had already requested advance copies. Captain Chun, now Governor Chun of the New Haven colony, visited occasionally. They had become friends in the way that people who had witnessed history together often do. The Vryn completely withdrew from the Concordat last cycle. She mentioned during one visit, sharing what humans called coffee. Tekresh had developed a taste for it. Formed their own confederation with 6 neighboring species. I heard. The first speaker considers it a catastrophe. The first speaker considers everything a catastrophe these days. Chun sipped her coffee. But the Vrin Confederation is actually working. They're cooperating based on mutual benefit instead of imposed authority, trading freely, sharing technology, resolving disputes through negotiation rather than threat of force. The model is spreading. Turns out species like having a choice about who they associate with. Chun smiled. Who knew? Tekrish made the Volthine gesture of amusement. You knew. Your entire species knew. You simply made us all remember. We made you ask questions. The answers were always there. They sat in comfortable silence, looking out at New Haven. The colony had grown to 50,000 humans and, surprisingly, 3,000 non-humans. Sarati artists who wanted to create without censorship. Vrin merchants who preferred human trade practices. Even a handful of Volthine who, like Tekrish, had decided the old ways no longer served them. It was messy and loud, and sometimes chaotic. But it was also vibrant and free, and built on genuine cooperation rather than enforced compliance. Do you regret it? Chun asked. Leaving the Concordat? No, Tekrish said. And he meant it. I spent 300 cycles serving an institution that claimed to bring peace, but actually brought control. I told species they needed permission to exist, and I never questioned if that was right. You made me question. You made the entire galaxy question. We just refused to ask permission. That simple refusal changed everything. Tekrish stood and moved to the window. Outside, humans and non-humans worked together on a construction project. No one asked anyone's permission. They simply cooperated because they chose to. You taught us that authority without consent is just oppression with better marketing. Chun joined him at the window. What do you think happens next? More change. More chaos. More species remembering they can say no. Tekrish felt his sensory stalks rise with what might have been hope. The Concordat will have to keep adapting, or it'll dissolve entirely. Either way, the galaxy will never return to what it was. Is that good? I believe so. The old system was stable, but it was also stagnant. Change is frightening, but it is also necessary for growth. Very philosophical, Ambassador. Retired Ambassador, Tekrish corrected. And yes, I have been reading human philosophy. You have many interesting thinkers. Locke, Rousseau, Douglas, King. They understood something the Concordat forgot. That legitimate authority comes from the consent of the governed, not from the ability to enforce compliance. Chun raised her coffee cup. To consent, then, and to the radical idea that beings shouldn't need permission to exist. Tekrish raised his own cup. To humanity, who didn't ask permission, who simply existed, and in doing so, reminded the galaxy that it could exist too. They drank together, watching the sun set over New Haven, a human colony on an empty world that no one gave them permission to settle. A thriving community built by beings who refused to accept that existence required authorization. In the distance, construction continued. Humans and non-humans working together, building, creating, living, without asking anyone's permission.